So we're up here with QRC Superstar Crew Chief, for a runner or what? Or
no.
Is it SRT QRC WXYZ in this world? You're like the Kevin Rumley of this stuff or what?
No, I don't. Started SRT a few years ago and sold that during COVID, and then we started Ignite and did a little project on that. And I've stepped away from that, so we're back with QRC
But QRC was like a rival, right? Like builder.
You know, it's not really just like a rival. Like, we had no problem when we started our own deal. I always wanted to do my own stuff, and I like going down a different path and trying new things. So I just don't like to follow what everybody else does all the time.
Well, and these cars are pretty basic in themselves. They don't really do y'all run a shock package or a bar package? I mean, the chassis kind of like, I guess there's springs in the inner tubing or something like that.
You don't really have suspension, so your main flex of your car is the frame. You know, so where the weld points and the tubing you use in that is your suspension. So we're constantly moving stuff around and moving bars and trying stuff to, you know, get a little edge on certain types of tracks and driver feeling that way.
So when you say move bars, are you saying you will weld on extra pieces in certain areas to add weight distribution to the overall car?
Yeah. I mean, like when we do R&D with different frames, you know, we basically say like the back seat bar, you know, we're moving that forward or back or changing the angle of that because every little movement or the way things are welded changes the way the frame flexes. But most of your setup, you know, is basically your weights in your car, like how you have the weights set up in the front end, how you jack the weight around, and your wheel spacing, your stagger. And so there's still plenty of adjustments on these.
Okay, but that's about it. Spacing, pressure.
Yep.
Stagger, I guess, is tire size.
Yep. Yeah, your difference in your right rear to your left rear, you know, is your stagger.
What about left fronts? Can you do anything there?
You can, but there's not a lot of room for, you know, how much you can stretch and grow tires in the front. So usually you kind of get, you know, kind of a number you set with, and you don't mess with those too much.
Okay. And it makes a big difference when you adjust it.
Oh yeah. I mean, just like
like changing the tire pressure would be like, you know, shock adjustment, bar adjustment, all in one.
Yeah. Like the you know, just going down a half pound or a pound on a tire, you know, makes a big difference, or moving a wheel, you know, an 1/8 inch or a 1/4 inch makes a big difference. So there's a lot we play with.
And then, how competitive is this stuff to begin with? It seems like there's a lot of cars.
There is a lot of cars.
In the hotbeds especially.
Yeah, like these bigger areas, there's a lot of cars, and you know, there's certain races you go to where there'll be, you know, 50, 60 opens, and I'd say 40 of those are like the best equipment, you know, where it's not all diluted down in a lot of these big races. So you're going against the best equipment, you know, and all these drivers are racing 7,500 times a year, you know, for younger drivers, that's a lot. So everybody's pretty competitive.
Well, and that's kind of the point, I guess, is this is a younger driver thing. I mean, there is older drivers that do it. Seems like the younger drivers coming up in the open wheel world are trying to decide, most of the time based on geological location, which one to get into, either an outlaw kart or a micro. That seems to be the debate on which lane you pick.
Yeah.
A lot of people say, you know, the outlaw kart drives more like a bigger sprint car. The micro is kind of its own little gig. What about cost, though? When you get down to it, I'm sure you're in California, so you're kind of in an area where both classes exist.
Yeah.
Is it just about the same as a 10J, you know, with all the fixins?
I would say go-karts are probably...
And we're talking about specifically the 500.
Yeah,
you know.
I would say, you know, like when you get to this level, it's still significantly cheaper than a micro for sure. And like the biggest reason why we don't go micro racing is like our plan is to be in a sprint car, you know, within 2-3 years. And if we went to micros right now, the cost of them versus what we get on return on investment is not worth it for us. For something we're just going to be in a year or two and, you know, lose 50-60% of what we invest in it, where we can run micro, or we can go run a micro a handful of times for other people and run go-karts right now and get more seat time, and cost-wise it's just more effective.
Well, it does seem like the big names from that region of the country, California particularly, they are coming out of the Outlaw Karts.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's awesome drivers and guys coming out of micros, but I would say in the last 10 years, you look at everyone that's winning, and you know, all the top guys in USAC and Outlaws and everything, majority of them, you know, came from Outlaw Karts. You know, and they get criticism, and a lot of people don't like them, but because of their quick manner, and they're so quick reacting, and they're so fast to accelerate like that, that power.
But that's more so close to the wing cars, the
exactly.
big cars.
Yep.
That is.
Yeah, so I feel like we've talked about before, but I feel like that's why kids get out of go-karts and jump in sprint cars or midgets, and within a couple nights they look like they've done it, for half their life. So.
Well, and Millbridge was one of those tracks that it looked like was going to go Outlaw Kart style, but they have slipped into the micros, it seems like, a little more than the Outlaw Karts.
Yeah.
Was there any reason for that?
I think Millbridge, because it's such a big momentum, kind of a big circle track. So the open motors, like if guys spent huge money on go-kart motors, like the big 4-strokes out there, they would dominate. So guys were putting 20, 25 grand in those motors, and the average go-kart guy didn't want to spend that much, and they weren't competitive unless they did that. So once micros got introduced to Millbridge, if everyone's going to be like, well, if I'm going to spend 30, 40 grand on a race car, I might as well get a micro and have suspension and everything. So I feel like Millbridge, just the way it evolved, the way those big motors dominated, it kind of priced themselves out. So that's why it kind of faded the last couple of years.
Well, and I guess micros, they have their A-class division where it's somewhat of a, sealed motor style of situation, where I guess the 500s, it's just open, outlaw style.
Yeah, pretty much. And that does help keep the cost down a lot for sure.
Is there anything close to a restricted 500 class, or is it just...
There's a couple classes that have tried to do stuff like that.
Is that like the combatants to the micro, price guy?
A little bit.
Especially when you get onto the bigger tracks. Obviously, if you're here at Eastern or English Creek,
yeah,
or you're at Cycle Land or Red Bluff, you're not really, like you said, at Millbridge, you got the big lip at the top, the wide sweeping corners. You're not really going to lay it down on those tighter tracks.
Yeah.
But for the sake of most places that have micros, and you may want to introduce Outlaw Karts, it almost would be like a good counteractive to maybe have some kind of 500 sealed, restricted style class.
It's just hard to do after it's so established and people are where they're at. And anytime they introduce a new class, it's one of those things that takes years to kind of get going, and a lot of people don't want to take the chance on starting something new. When this is still pretty strong in other parts of the country, but. There's a couple places, actually in North Carolina, a guy named Lou Madison started a stock 450 class, and that was kind of the idea, just to, as he saw, the open stuff get out of hand cost-wise, he was trying to reel that back in, but I think it was kind of too late to where the micros kind of took off in that area, so it was hard to get some of those go-kart guys back to do something else again, after they move up into a micro.
Well, and is it a chassis sort of situation where a 500 is as big as you can go? You can't put a 6 on there, or something in bigger displacement but as restricted?
Yeah, it's just more about what fits and the weight of a motor, and people have tried stuff over the years, but really that, for the 4-strokes, like the 500s and 550s and stuff like that, kind of seem to be the sweet spot, and for the 2-strokes, the CR500 stuff, is it's just kind of all around the best motor for what we do with it.
Right. Oh, it's just interesting how micros could come into that Millbridge scene and kind of take over that Outlaw Kart scene that was building. You would think that there would be the Outlaw Kart guys trying to figure out a way where they could introduce a new Outlaw Kart class that people would switch over to.
Right.
But when you get into those micro areas, you have the bigger tracks like a Millbridge style, where they're more equal.
Yeah.
So it's a difficult deal, even though I do think that these are closer to your 364 10s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Millbridge is making a push again, trying to get more open cars, and they've been playing with rules and trying to get things kind of brought back down. And so I know them and Jimmy Elledge have been involved in trying to get more races going out there. So I think they're trying to get that crowd back out, to hopefully in a couple of years it's as strong as it is in Texas and Oklahoma and California. So get that build back up again.
Okay. Are you done?
No,
you can keep going.
No, it don't matter.
I'm just making sure. I didn't know if you're intimidated. We started back here. You kept slowly getting back. I didn't know if I was scaring you.
No, I lay low.
You lay low. How low?
They try to be too flashy, I guess.
Yeah, you're not a Tyler Seavey, that's for sure.